Good evening, you're watching London Live News at 6 with James Dickman. Coming up tonight, the sense of an ending was in the air, as even the expressions on the faces of his own party at Prime Minister's questions seemed to suggest time might be up for Boris Johnson, as today, in their droves, ministers handed in their resignations. Has the Chris Pincher sexual misconduct scandal finally broken the camel's back? Enough is enough. Sajid Javid gave his resignation speech to the House, saying he worries the scandals that have marred Boris Johnson's tenure will cause irreparable damage to the Conservatives' reputation for a generation. We'll have an update on London's weather as well in the next 10 minutes, also on the way. The Women's Euros kicks off tonight with England as hosts. The Lionesses will welcome Austria in their first match as favourites in the tournament. And Beauty and the Beast on stage in the capital will learn of the production tricks involved that will be bringing the magic of the Disney classic to the Palladium. But first, to the situation in Westminster today. Conservative MPs resigned in their dozens, with more coming in by the hour. Boris Johnson had to confront fierce questioning from Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer and others in the House of Commons after resignations of Chancellor Rishi Sunak and Health Secretary Sajid Javid last night got the ball rolling for today's chaos. After months of continual scandal, the issue of why he appointed Chris Pincher in government as Deputy Chief Whip, despite knowing about sexual misconduct allegations about him, may prove to be the last act in his premiership. These were the scenes from what could be Boris Johnson's last PMQs.
Doesn't that just sum him up? Awful behaviour, unacceptable in any walk of life. It's there for all to see, but he ignores it. It was the same when his ally was on the take from the lobbyists. It was the same when his Home Secretary was bullying staff. It was the same when taxpayers' money was being abused. And it was the same when he and his mates parted their way through lockdown. Anyone quitting now, after defending all that, hasn't got a shred of integrity. Mr. Speaker, isn't this the first recorded case of the sinking ships fleeing the rat?
He talks about integrity. He is himself facing a criminal investigation, Mr. Speaker, for which he asked me to resign.
Keir Starmer.
What a pathetic spectacle. The dying act of his political career is to parrot that nonsense. And as for those who are left, only in office because no one else is prepared to debase themselves any longer, the charge of the lightweight brigade. Have some self-respect. Mr. Speaker, for a week, he's had them defending his decision to promote a sexual predator. Every day, the lines he's forced them to take have been untrue. Anyone with anything about them would be long gone from his front bench. In the middle of a crisis, doesn't the country deserve better than a Z-list cast of nodding dogs? When I was prosecuting rapists, I heard that from victims all the time. Victims said they froze because it's not about sex, it's about power. And the power the disgraced government minister had was handed to him by that Prime Minister. And he's only in power because he's been propped up for months by a corrupted party defending the indefensible. So it's no longer a case about swapping the person at the top. Isn't it clear? The only way the country can get the fresh start it deserves is by getting rid of the lot of them.
Today we are cutting taxes, we're helping 500,000 people into work, and thanks to the strength of our economy, we're helping people up and down the country, and we are going to continue to deliver on the mandate I was given.
Senior ministers continued to ask Boris Johnson to resign today. Even Michael Gove, the Levelling Up secretary, told the PM he needs to resign. Boris Johnson has insisted he wanted to stay in office despite a growing revolt. The PM won a vote of confidence in his leadership last month and is safe from another vote for a year after the Conservative 1922 committee voted to not change the rules to trigger another before then. Just quickly on Chris Pincher, two police forces investigated allegations of sexual assault by a man believed to be the MP now. The complaints were made about two alleged incidents, one in London between 2010 and 2012 and another in Staffordshire in May 2019. As first reported by Channel 4 News, no action was taken by the Metropolitan or Staffordshire forces in either case. Back to the situation today. At the close of PMQs, Sajid Javid read his resignation statement on why he decided to resign as Health Secretary, saying his role in government became an impossible task.
Effective governance inevitably requires loyalty and collective responsibility. Of course it does. And I'm instinctively a team player. And I have completely focused on governing effectively over the last year. But treading the tightrope between loyalty and integrity has become impossible in recent months. And, Mr. Speaker, I will never risk losing my integrity. I also believe a team is as good as its team captain, and that a captain is as good as his or her team. So loyalty must go both ways. The events of recent months have made it increasingly difficult to be in that team. It's not fair on ministerial colleagues to go out every morning defending lines that don't stand up and don't hold up. It's not fair on my parliamentary colleagues who bear the brunt of constituents' dismay in their inboxes and on their doorsteps in recent elections. And it's not fair on Conservative members and voters who rightly expect better standards from the party they supported. When the first stories of parties in Downing Street emerged late last year, I was personally assured at the most senior level by my right honourable friend's then team that, and I quote, there had been no parties in Downing Street and no rules were broken. So I gave the benefit of doubt. And I went on those media rounds to say that I'd had those assurances from the most senior level of the Prime Minister's team. Then we had more stories. We had the Sue Gray report, a new Downing Street team. I continued to give the benefit of the doubt. And now this week again, we have reason to question the truth and integrity of what we've all been told. And at some point, we have to conclude that enough is enough. I believe that point is now.
Well, let's just move away from the scene in Westminster to some other stories from the capital today. The Metropolitan Police will apologise to the family of Richard Okurunge for failings identified by a watchdog into the handling of initial reports that he was missing. The 19-year-old went missing from his home in West London on the 22nd of March last year. His body was found 20 miles away in Epping Forest in Essex 2 weeks later. The Independent Office for Police Conduct investigated complaints about how officers handled the initial reports that he was missing. Richard left his home in Ladbroke Grove without his medication but was not officially recorded as missing until the 24th of March, which was 2 days later. Police failed to correctly record the teenager's medical condition after they were told he had sickle cell anemia. Also, law graduate Zara Elena died from head and neck injuries, a coroner's court has heard. The 35-year-old was killed when she was attacked in the early hours of Sunday the 26th of June as she walked home from a night out along Cranbrook Road in Ilford, an area she knew well and where her family said she felt safe. A man has been charged with her murder. British Airways has reportedly cancelled over 650 flights from London's Heathrow Airport and Gatwick Airport. Well, this means that over 76,000 seats will be scrapped from Heathrow flights, as well as a further 29,400 from Gatwick. The move is set to be exempt from usual rules that mean airlines can cancel flights without being penalised for not using their airport slot in a one-off amnesty by ministers, but that will end on the 8th of July. And looking ahead and back, Cameron Norrie's father has said watching the British number one's dramatic Wimbledon quarter-final was torture. David Norrie, a microbiologist originally from Glasgow, said he struggled to sit through the 5-set thriller against Belgian David Goffin last night. Norrie became only the 4th British man in 50 years to reach the last 4 at SW19 and will face top seed Novak Djokovic in the semi-final tomorrow afternoon. Something to look forward to there in Wimbledon. Now tonight, looking at the weather for that match, it will become largely clear at first before cloud builds during the early hours of the evening, staying relatively warm overnight as well. Tomorrow is expected to see large amounts of cloud, but staying largely dry throughout as well. Highs of 25 degrees tomorrow, so should stay dry for Norrie. Friday and Saturday, similar days, patchy cloud with a few bright spells, looking slightly warmer as well, heading into those high 20s, 27 expected on Thursday. Right, so stay with us. We're just taking a little break now, but after, children bearing the brunt of the cost of living crisis, a nightmare situation in school canteens across the capital, as new research suggests 90% of caterers are experiencing food shortages.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
welcome back. On to some of the day's main UK headlines now. Affecting Londoners, more than 2 million low-income workers will no longer pay national insurance. From today, employees can now earn £12,570 a year before paying national insurance, up from £9,880 a year previously, although in April the government increased the rate paid to raise money to fund health and social care. These changes mean workers earning less than around 34k a year will pay less. The pound has fallen to a 2-year low against the dollar. The dip reflects traders' increasing concerns about a recession around the world as energy prices continue to soar amidst the cost of living crisis. Well, sterling is also weak as markets worry about future economic growth. The sterling could fall even further after predictions of economic stagnation as inflation soars as well. London shares regained some ground today following Tuesday's big falls. And the Women's European Championships kick off today with hosts England taking on Austria. A record-breaking 500,000 tickets, twice as many as attended the previous Euros in the Netherlands 4 years ago, have been sold, with the final being staged at a sold-out Wembley Stadium on the 31st of July. England are favourites to win Euro 2022. Well, 70,000 plus are expected inside Old Trafford this evening. It's the first of 31 matches across 25 days. Well, England boss Sarina Wiegman says the Lionesses are raring to go.
We started this preparation, well, we started this September last year, but the real preparation for the Euro started May 30th. And we just worked from week to week and from training match to training match. So after the Switzerland game, we came back, we had a little time off, and then we started training to get ready for the match for tomorrow. And you can feel that everyone's really ready, and we just want to go.
There you go, kick-off in just under 2 hours for the whole tournament at Old Trafford, England versus Austria. Now, the free school meal system is under severe pressure as 90% of caterers are experiencing food shortages, according to new research from the LACA. The local authority catering association, whose membership represent 80% of the school meal service in the UK, say the cost of living crisis could see children falling through the cracks. Henry has been speaking to the National Vice Chair about what this means for kids across the country.
Our members have told us is that they're seeing rises of between 20 and 30% on average across all food groups. So that's meat, potatoes, bread, pasta, eggs. So it's a real concern about how we can continue to deliver the high quality service going forward.
With the cost of living increasing and food prices going up, is this just yet another knock-on effect from that?
Well, yes. I mean, it's obviously we've had Brexit, we've had COVID, we're coming out of that, and we all were aware and we experienced the issues around the availability of drivers before. But now we've got to this is still feeding through. Added to that, we've got the cost of fuel in terms of the cost of deliveries is just adding more and more pressure to a service which is funded, from government at a fixed level.
You talk about the systems already experiencing a rise in demand. What's the reality for some of these children then who rely on free school meals?
Well, we know that for many children, a hot school lunch is the only proper meal of the day. We know that there are 1.9 million children across England who are entitled to benefit-based free school meals, and that's gone up 160,000 since last autumn, as the government announced earlier. But what we also know is that the threshold for being eligible for free school meals is £7,400 of household income before benefits. That means it's calculated there's a further 800,000 children who are living in poverty and missing out. So the ability to access a school lunch freshly prepared using fresh ingredients is vital. It's fundamental to them attending school, their attainment and their attention and their growth.
We've mentioned then that demand is increasing for free school meals as it is. With the demand going up, that just puts more pressure on the system that's already struggling.
It does two things. One is economies of scale. So it's much better for us as caterers to be making food for 100 or 200 children rather than a smaller number. So that helps. But of course, it does mean that we need access to the food supplies and the availability of those supplies more frequently and more readily. So the pressures on the system where food may not be available or is more costly is adding pressure from that point of view.
So 80% of the school's catering service provided by LACER members. As you're the national vice chair of LACER, what's the answer then? What can be done to try and fix this situation?
So for England, we've got a real mixed and fragmented economy of how school food is provided. So we've got single site schools who employ their own staff. We've got local authorities who provide the catering service. We've got commercial caterers, and we've got a mix of others. And what we all need to happen is for a realistic conversation with government about increasing levels of funding to deal with the cost pressures now. What we've seen over the last few months, 20 to 30% increases. We need increases now in that level of funding to meet the need now, and then we need ongoing annual increases to keep pace with inflation. If we look at the levels of funding that are available for a benefit-based free school meal, we get £2.47 per child, but that's for food and labour in terms of production, cooking and service. For universal infant free school meals, that's just £2.41, so less, and was increased by just 7 pence by the government from the 1st of April this year, and that was announced a week or two ago. That's just 2.9% against these 30% increases that we're seeing. So it's the way to resolve it has to be a conversation which says funding needs to be increased to cover the cost of what's happening in real time.
How realistic is it, in your opinion, that you can get some funding from the government? Because there's a lot going on at Downing Street and Number 10 that might avert their attention from issues like this.
Well, I think you're right. I mean, I think everybody knows there are pressures all around, and it's not just school food that's been affected in terms of the cost of living crisis, but children's health is central to everything that we should do, and looking after the youngest in society to get them ready and fit to lead a healthy life as they leave school is what we should all be focusing on. And it's a false economy to say reduce the quality or put less on the plate. These children, as we said, are probably the only hot meal of the day in many cases, need this food and need it served in school.
Brad Pearce speaking there with Henry. Now, a new electric car scheme has been announced that aims to give people access to savings of 30 to 60% off the cost of leasing a new electric car via the companies they work for. The scheme is expected to work in a similar way to the Cycle to Work scheme. Well, let's take a look.
The electric car scheme is a scheme that helps people make the switch into electric cars and does it in a very similar way to Cycle to Work. We set the electric car scheme really because we wanted to encourage more people to move into electric cars. I mean, the benefits are quite obvious. It's much cheaper on fuel. It's good for the environment. And we found there was a great way to do this, which was through a Cycle to Work-like experience, like I just described. But found it was difficult to access if you work for a small or medium business. Our mission really is to get as many people to make the positive choice to go to net zero, in this case through electric cars, and to make that as simple and affordable as possible. So what we're aiming for is over the next 3 to 5 years is get as many businesses involved, as many people making that switch to electric cars. And on average, per employee, per car, the savings are about the equivalent of about just over 200 trees planted, which is a big saving in terms of carbon for the environment. And you can multiply that through. We're hoping to get about 50 to 100,000 people into cars over the next couple of years and make a significant contribution to get the UK to net zero. The environmental impact of switching to an electric car is pretty significant. And the most obvious place is from basically carbon emissions from the fuel. Obviously, as you're driving a car, burning fuel, CO2 emissions that go out into the environment. And that's the equivalent of about, it's called 20 megatons of CO2 over the life of a car. By switching people into electric cars, that completely falls away, because often the energy generated for the electricity that's going in can come from renewable sources. And the UK is well on its way to getting most of its electricity from renewable sources. You do still have the impact of creating and building the cars. For an electric car versus a petrol and diesel car, it's a little bit more sustainable, but not massive difference. but on average per car, 20 megatons of CO2 saved. And the longer CO2 is like a cumulative effect. Any emission that goes out into the world is bad because it doesn't reverses itself back out of the system after 3 years or not. So the sooner we can switch to electric cars, the less we'll have a buildup of CO2 in the atmosphere, and the better that is for our climate goals, our net zero goals, and the rising temperature and the climate catastrophe that we'll. Yeah, I think there's, for London specific, there's a couple of things that are happening. Obviously, you are now penalised for driving a petrol or diesel car in the congestion charge, which is £15 a month, and that's another reason why more and more people are switching to electric cars. So London's actually ahead of the rest of the UK. I think last month, half of new cars sold in London were electric cars. So it's really encouraging to see that uptake. Where we're still seeing the uptake a bit lower is people that own, I guess, older second-hand petrol and diesel cars who might struggle with the affordability of electric cars because all electric cars are new. And that's really where we come in to help out by making new electric cars much more affordable. As I said, through paying for it out your salary pre-tax is 30 to 60% cheaper. We're hoping that group in particular can really make the shift to electric sooner rather than later and really help us drive that environment.
Okay, right, stay with us because in just a few short minutes after another break, we'll have a recap of the chaotic scenes from Parliament today and a devastating day for the government.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Welcome back to London Live News. Let's head back to the situation in Westminster today for a recap of some of the action earlier on. Conservative MPs resigned in their dozens, with more coming in by the hour. Boris Johnson had to confront a fierce questioning from Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer and others in the House of Commons after resignations of Chancellor Rishi Sunak and Health Secretary Sajid Javid last night got the ball rolling for today's chaos. After months of continual scandal, the issue of why he appointed Chris Pincher in government as Deputy Chief Whip, despite knowing about sexual misconduct allegations about him, may prove to be the last act in Boris Johnson's premiership. Well, these were the scenes from what could be Boris Johnson's last PMQs.
Doesn't that just sum him up? Awful behaviour, unacceptable in any walk of life. It's there for all to see, but he ignores it. It was the same when his ally was on the take from the lobbyists. It was the same when his Home Secretary was bullying staff. It was the same when taxpayers' money was being abused. And it was the same when he and his mates parted their way through lockdown. Anyone quitting now, after defending all that, hasn't got a shred of integrity. Mr. Speaker, isn't this the first recorded case of the sinking ships fleeing the rat?
He talks about integrity. He is himself facing a criminal investigation, Mr. Speaker, which he asked me to resign.
Keir Starmer.
What a pathetic spectacle. The dying act of his political career is to parrot that nonsense. And as for those who are left, only in office because no one else is prepared to debase themselves any longer, the charge of the lightweight brigade. Have some self-respect. Mr. Speaker, for a week, he's had them defending his decision to promote a sexual predator. Every day, the lines he's forced them to take have been untrue. Anyone with anything about them would be long gone from his front bench. In the middle of a crisis, doesn't the country deserve better than a Z-list cast of nodding dogs? When I was prosecuting rapists, I heard that from victims all the time. Victims said they froze because it's not about sex, it's about power. And the power the disgraced government minister had was handed to him by that Prime Minister. And he's only in power because he's been propped up for months by a corrupted party defending the indefensible. So it's no longer a case about swapping the person at the top. Isn't it clear? The only way the country can get the fresh start it deserves is by getting rid of the lot of them.
Senior ministers continued to ask Boris Johnson to resign today. Even Michael Gove, the Levelling Up secretary, told the PM he needs to resign. Boris Johnson has insisted he wanted to stay in office despite a growing revolt. The PM won a vote of confidence in his leadership last month and is safe from another vote for a year after the Conservative 1922 committee voted to not change the rules to trigger another before then. Well, just quickly on Chris Pincher, two police forces investigated allegations of sexual assault by a man believed to be the MP now. The complaints were made about two alleged incidents, one in London between 2010 and 2012 and another in Staffordshire in May 2019. As first reported by Channel 4 News, no action was taken by the Metropolitan or Staffordshire forces in either case. Well, let's just move away from the scene in Westminster to some other stories from the capital today. The Metropolitan Police will apologise to the family of Richard Okurunge for failings identified by a watchdog into the handling of initial reports that he was missing. The 19-year-old went missing from his home in West London on the 22nd of March last year. His body was found 20 miles away in Epping Forest in Essex 2 weeks later. The Independent Office for Police Conduct investigated complaints about how officers handled the initial reports that he was missing. Richard left his home in Ladbroke Grove without his medication but was not officially recorded as missing until the 24th of March, which was 2 days later. Police failed to correctly record the teenager's medical condition after they were told he had sickle cell anemia. Also, law graduate Zara Elena died from head and neck injuries, a coroner's court has heard. The 35-year-old was killed when she was attacked in the early hours of Sunday the 26th of June as she walked home from a night out along Cranbrook Road in Ilford, an area she knew well and where her family said she felt safe. A man has been charged with her murder. Now, to a play about the complexity of finding your place in a new country. Give Me the Sun by playwright Marmot Lee explores family, identity and immigration whilst carefully deconstructing a father-son relationship after they migrate to the UK. Well, the play will open at the Blue Elephant Theatre, Camberwell, later this month. Let's hear a little bit more now.
It basically revolves around a relationship between a father and son that moved over to the UK from Egypt. And Baba kind of uses this, him turning 18 as an opportunity to have their first ever kind of serious talk. They've got a quite typical, maybe not so typical now, but a fairly typical father-son relationship where everything previously was kind of surface level. They talk about school, they talk about sport and how things are day to day. They talk about the weather, but they never kind of delve below the surface. And Baba asking Bashir if he wants to have a serious talk prompts all of Bashir's feelings that he's been having privately about Egypt and a longing for home. It prompts him to ask the question of why they came to the UK. And that leads to a night of kind of conflict and back and forth and truth being told kind of for the first time in their relationship. We're certainly interested in this theme of belonging and I know Mamet is the writer is keen to kind of project a real immigrant experience. I think he was saying that quite often he feels that people think that coming from a different country to escape whatever they were going through in that country, coming to the UK is kind of easy and that everything's fine and that they lead happy lives because they've escaped whatever they came from. But actually that brings with it a whole host of other issues and complications and difficulties. So I think he's keen on reflecting that a kind of truer immigrant and resonating with people that struggle with identity and that feeling of belonging. It's like, where do I belong? Even though I've been here all my life, I don't necessarily feel like I belong here. I certainly don't belong where I've come from because I've not been there for so many years. I think it's always going to have relevance in terms of in terms of immigration and in terms of how accepting we are of people that come here. I mean, especially as immigration rules tighten and we kind of turn refugees and migrants away. I think it deals with those important issues in terms of are we doing enough for other people? Is it are we accepting enough of other people that come here? And are we aware of the difficulties that they face? And I think it will comment and resonate with people that have had similar experiences.
Give Me the Sun at the Blue Elephant Theatre in Camberwell later this month. Do check that out. Right, stay with us for our final part of this evening's programme. The magic of modern technology brings Beauty and the Beast to life in spectacular fashion on stage. We'll hear more after the break.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather. And know what's on around the city and and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Hello and welcome back to the final part of this evening's programme. Some theatre to end on this evening, and a tale as old as time has arrived at the Palladium for the summer. Beauty and the Beast is back in the West End, starring Shaq Taylor as the Beast and Sam Bailey as Mrs. Potts. Well, the Disney classic has been given an update for the latest run, using the most up-to-date technology to bring the magic of the tale to the stage. Alicia has been hearing more from Shaq and Sam.
Bonjour! 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 Look, there she goes, I've got a strange but special, a most peculiar mademoiselle.
We've been travelling around to different theatres, and obviously the backstage areas are quite different everywhere we go. It's beautiful when you look out front, and when obviously the show's on, everybody's engrossed in what's going on stage. But backstage, it's just madness, absolutely madness backstage, because it's at this venue, it's quite tight backstage. So at every different venue we go to, we expect it to be pretty crazy for the first sort of week or so before we actually work out who needs to move. I like to call it human Tetris backstage. That's pretty much what it is.
No pain could be deeper. No life could be cheaper.
There's so many huge numbers in the show. Shaq, one of them comes from you, If I Can't Love Her, right before the interval. How do you find performing that song night after night?
I feel like it's like the 10 o'clock number, as they would say. It's kind of
the 11 o'clock number.
11 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, same time. And it's that song right at the end of Act 1, so I feel a lot of pressure having to deliver that every night, but it's
the
very...
note is just ridiculous.
It's very, very fulfilling to sing.
Sam, you're not short of some big numbers yourself. Of course, Tale as Old as Time, a song so many of us know so well already. Was it already in your repertoire?
Only because I've wanted to sing this song so long, but I used to sing it in a show years ago with the duet version. But this is slightly different. This is more pulled back. It's kind of... It works really well with what's going on at stage at the time, so it's more like an actor's choice in this number. I don't really get a chance to belt out any songs in this show, so this is purely an actor's choice to sing it the way that I do, and it works. It really does work, and it doesn't take away from what's going on, because that's what everyone's really focused on is them starting to fall in love, and this is a really funny moment and quite endearing moment that's happening on the stage, and I get to watch it every night, and it's great.
But also, this is one of those songs that everyone's looking
knows.
forward to.
Yeah, and they love it, and they sing along.
That's a lot of pressure.
It's a pressure because if I forget the words at any point,
you are not
going to get away with that.
I can't get away with it.
As you say, it is a very well-known show, and there's such Disney magic in it. How do you find performing knowing that there are lots of young people in the audience that may be having their first ever experience of live theatre?
Yeah, I was actually speaking to someone about this the other day. It's such a joy to see people at stage door afterwards in their bell dresses and their Beast get up, their Gaston get up, and just speaking with them and getting to take pictures with them. Like, that's probably one of the highlights for me, knowing that I'm someone that someone else is looking up to.
100%. Yeah,
that's really special.
And it's like nice to see for me, because it was when you walk out, they're like, oh, it's Mrs. Potts. As soon as they come out, Belle and the Beast, it's like, yeah, we don't want to talk to you anymore. I'm like, yeah, bye. See you soon. But it's beautiful. Like, there are so many people that this is their first ever experience of theatre. I feel like theatre's way more accessible now for all walks of life. So, Disney have really got it right with the relaxed performances that we have. And obviously, young children coming to see this show. There's like a sea of yellow dresses in the audience watching this show, and they know and love the story. And some are adults that know and love this story, like big Disney fanatics that come to watch the show. And it's just a sea of people coming to say hello to us afterwards, to say how much they've loved it. And it's really brilliant to see, especially after the couple of years that we've had. It's nice to be back.
Yeah, Beauty and the Beast was my first experience of West End theatre back many, many years ago. Do you guys remember your first experience of the theatre and what made you want to get up there and do it yourself?
What was yours?
I think my mum took me to a play called Sundance at the Hackney Empire. I think I was about 8. I don't remember what it was about, but I just remember loads of people dancing on stage. And at the end, they brought up children on stage, and they brought me up onto the stage. And I remember looking up thinking, I want to do this.
Wow.
I was like, I want to do this. I don't care what I'm doing on stage, but I want to do this.
I'm really old, so I can't actually remember that far back. I don't remember. I got taken to a lot of pantos as a kid. It was kind of a ritual every year that we went to pantos. But I think the first ever proper show that I went to see, this is going to sound really, really weird, but my boyfriend at the time's nan used to be a host family, so she used to look after people that come over from different countries. And she rang me up one day and said, I've got a load of nuns from Germany that want a tour guide around London. Will you take them to see cats? So I took about 30 nuns to see cats. It was my first ever experience of a West End show, and it was the most surreal thing I've ever done in my life. But it was brilliant, and that was my first experience. Taking 30 German nuns to go and see cats. You couldn't make it up.
No,
really,
you literally couldn't. Sam, you've obviously had a bit of a career change in the last decade. The X Factor, obviously, nearly 10 years ago now. How does that feel like a lifetime ago, or does it feel like it's flown by?
It does feel like a long time ago, but I feel like I'm coasting in the nice gear now. You know, I never wanted to be famous. I wanted to get a new kitchen and an extension on my house. This is totally true. I never wanted the fame side of it. I just wanted to perform and have a little bit of longevity. And I feel like I've achieved that. And doing this is where I kind of want to sit. I don't want to sort of, be that famous that I couldn't go anywhere. I do feel for a lot of people that are in that situation. I do like where I'm sitting at the moment, and although it was a long time ago, Never Bite the Hand That Feeds You, that show gave me something that I couldn't possibly do on my own, so I'm really grateful.
She does get stopped everywhere she goes, by the way.
Yeah, I was going to say, are you sure? When it comes to actually getting on stage and performing, you both have some fairly major costumes going on. What was it like the first time you got to put on your costume? Shaq, for you, putting on the Beast costume and the prosthetics on your face, did it affect your performing?
Very restricting, especially my main Beast costume, but I feel like that adds to the intensity and
the way that you hold yourself.
Yeah,
on
the way he's trapped within himself, it adds to it. So if anything, it's a blessing almost. I would have struggled even more if it was something that was comfortable to wear.
I'm just a big, huge teapot. There's a difference. I'm just a big, massive teapot that gets in the way of everyone.
No, I was thinking, your arm is stuck in that position for so long. Is it uncomfortable?
So there's nothing holding my arm up. It's purely so that it's like, I have one Gaston arm and one Bingo wing. That's the only way I can describe it. But this show's great. We have a great physio on this show to help us with that as well. And there's a lot of things that I didn't realise I would be doing when I took on this show. So it's really kind of helped me sort of look after my top half of my body more. And yes, Mrs. Potts is quite large in that costume, and I do have to hold my arm up, but it's what makes it. And there's a lot of people in the audience that ask that question all the time. I say Disney magic because Disney made me do this, and I have to hold it up for this long, and it's great, and I love it. It's good. I've just got one massive bicep, that's all.
Speaking of the kind of physical aspects of the job, Be Our Guest is obviously such a huge number, spectacle. How was it for the whole cast rehearsing that one? Because, I mean, it's long, isn't it, that song?
12 minutes.
I don't know how they do it. I really do not know how they do it. I mean, I literally go on stage, do probably 30 seconds a tap. I'm frothing at the mouth, and those guys are like 11-minute number, and Gavin is sensational. Courtney tapped out. They are just absolute, all of them that do that part of the show, and it gets such a big round of applause when they do Gaston as well. That's so full on. They have to really look after themselves, and they're so good at what they do. So massive fair play to them.
There you go, Beauty and the Beast is on at the Palladium until the 17th of September, so plenty of time to get down and see that one. Now let's just take one final look at the weather before we leave you this evening. Tonight it will largely become clear at first before clouds building during the early hours of this morning, staying relatively warm overnight. Tomorrow is expected to see large amounts of cloud, but stay largely dry as well. Highs of around 25 degrees. Friday and Saturday, a similar picture. Patchy cloud with a few bright spells, looking slightly warmer heading into those high 20s as we go throughout the week. Around sort of 27 degrees, so quite a warm one before 30s expected next week. Right, that is all we have time for this evening. Thank you for watching. Do join us again tomorrow. There is plenty more content though on our social media channels. Follow us at London Live across the board. But for now, Good night and take care.